So hello once again, everyone. Steve Taylor here. Thanks a lot for tuning in, for clicking, for downloading, whatever it might be, to another session of what we like to call the thoughts and growth mode, right? I have a couple different formats for this podcast. One is where we interview business owners, but this is really more on a subject matter area. And the subject matter that we're working on in these few episodes most recently is really the issue, which really is prevalent almost on everybody's mind. It's one of the biggest issues really out there in our country, maybe around the world, is the issue of aging and long-term care planning and how we deal and how we address and how we go through that. You know, the first episode in this series, we had a wonderful young lady who's really passionate about starting a business, about starting those conversations and trying to be proactive and everything as you might be. But so in this episode, we come at it from a different point of view. This is really, my hope here is to kind of address and maybe dispel some myths about Medicaid and long-term planning. And with us today, we have an expert on the subject. Andy. Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do.
Hi, my name is Andy Bellison, or Andrew Bellinson is what the judges always call me. And I'm an attorney who focuses on elder law. And specifically, I focus on a moment in people's lives when they may have to take care of their parents or grandparents to help pay for long-term care. And that means care at home, could mean assisted living in an assisted living facility, or it could mean nursing home and long-term care. And while I help families with that and I address planning issues and lots of emotional issues, I'm mostly focused on getting them qualified for either Medicaid or the Veterans Administration benefits and protecting assets. So that's what I focus on every day. And I speak to a lot of families that are in a moment of crisis, and it feels really good to be able to help them out.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a very similar in this regard, Andy. I used to practice in this area, and so I know I'm very familiar with what you go through. But so let's start, Andy, really talking about these scenarios that your initial introduction or how you meet these families and kind of their situation, right? Because many people, I'm on the planner now, and we try to address these things beforehand, but so many times people just don't. So maybe walk us through, maybe a typical fact pattern of like how someone finds you, who's reaching out to you, what are you talking about, kind of, what's a scenario, and lay the groundwork for, once you get brought in.
Okay, so good question. So what happens typically is that grandma has fallen and she goes to the hospital, and in the hospital, if she stays for a couple of days, when they're ready to let her out because she no longer needs to be in a hospital, they'll usually send her to a rehab facility. And somewhere between the hospital, the rehab facility, maybe a doctor's office, somebody says to them, "Oh, what are you going to do when she is able to go back home? Because she can't be there alone," right? Because she's fallen. It's probably her second or third time falling. And the family is really concerned. And at that moment, often people will say, maybe you should speak to somebody about getting benefits through the VA or through Medicaid. Maybe you should speak with an elder law attorney. Maybe you should speak with a social worker. And that's how all of my clients come to me. I don't have any advertising. So all of my clients are going to come from a trusted professional after somebody, almost always, after somebody has had a crisis. So Steve, you've sent me clients. A lot of financial advisors might have had this conversations, the good ones at least, with their clients in advance about this. A lot of times it's social workers, people who work in skilled nursing, people who work at hospitals. Those are the people, they know that I've helped out other similar families, and they give them my phone number. And every day when I get a call, I always ask them, where did you hear about me? So I just know where they are in this process. And it's always somebody in the pinch point areas where all of a sudden a family is being told that their grandmother can't go home, can't live at home alone, at least, and maybe they need caregivers, but it's really, really expensive to have a caregiver in their house, even a few hours a day. So a lot of times, I know when I went through this with my dad, I said, how are we going to pay for this? How is this going to happen? I have a brother and a sister, and we talked about it, and we could pay for a little while, but it was luckily we met somebody who told us about the VA benefit. And
was it Andy? I'm just interested. Was that before you were really practicing in this area and just learning about it when you went through it personally?
Definitely, it was before.
Okay.
I had heard about this because I used to help people in financial crisis. So I'd heard some people who did quite well in their careers telling me that they were out of money all of a sudden, yet they were making a couple $100,000 a year, and I couldn't understand how that could be. But then when they described they took care of their aunt or they had to take care of their mom, then I started to learn about it. But it wasn't, then we went through it, my family went through it. And then it really wasn't even for another year that I really got involved in it professionally. And it's been the best thing I've ever done for my life and my career. It's a great practice area. I'm able to help people. I'm a lawyer who actually gets hugs from their clients. I'm always like, hey, I'm your attorney. You don't need to hug me. But really the adult children, when I've finally told them they're not going to have to pay $10,000 a month or $15,000 a month to keep their grandmother in a nursing home, and I can have the government pay for that, and it's all legal, and we're not committing fraud, and I'm able to protect their home. Of course, people want to hug me because they just heard a lot of good information that relieves them. I mean, I'm an attorney, but I feel like half my practice is really therapy because nobody knows about this. Yeah. And you're getting hit as a family member. When I went through this, getting hit on so many different sides. Like with my dad, he fell. All of a sudden, this strong man was no longer so strong, and I had to face that. And then he had emotional issues, around that. Like he realized it, and he had to think about his own mortality. And at the same time, there's practical issues. Like, who's going to take care of him? Am I going to move into his apartment? I have kids. Yeah. There's a lot there. So getting the right pieces of information to get professionals to be able to help you is really key. And I try to deliver that too. I'm a lawyer, but I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of other areas in this sphere for families, and I can help guide them a little bit, tell them about different programs and different experts that I can help send them to.
So when they come to you, Andy, and they're in the pinch, as you mentioned, and this trusted professional has referred you, hey, listen, you need to speak to Andy, kind of like the wolf, right, from Pulp Fiction. You need to go talk to Andy, right? We're in this situation. What is it like? What is the first steps? Like, what do you go? What do you need? Right? You're the lawyer, right? You're not the care manager. Those professionals are taking care of that. What's the information that you look for? What are you trying to get from this family, like kind of immediately to help you do your job?
So, as a lawyer, I have to ask certain really important questions. So I start with this one. Tell me what's going on. Tell me your story, because I don't go right into the deep questions yet. I need somebody to tell me what they're actually facing, because one person could be, they spent 2 days in the hospital and they're ready to go home. And that's it, but they still wanted to reach out. Other people could be, they're not conscious, right? But they can't stay in the hospital anymore. They're stabilized, and that's the situation. So I really say, tell me about what's going on with your family member. And then I hear the story. Typically, my clients are going to be retired. They're going to be over the age of 65, and that's a key number in this process. If you're over 65, we've already jumped over a couple of hurdles. So then I ask them, as they're telling me their story, I'm figuring out what their needs are going to be, and I'm figuring out what their problems with getting approved without needing a lawyer might be, right? So if they own their own home, if they have an IRA, if they have money in the bank, all those things we can protect and overcome. But if you just threw in an application with any of those things and you didn't do it correctly, there would be problems getting benefits. So I really just go through, tell me about what their life was like before, what their finances are like. And it's just a real general question and answer opportunity. And I do most of that just on a phone call or a Zoom, because they don't need to, they're already in enough stress. They don't need to drive through Miami traffic, come down from Broward just to come meet with me to tell me things that we really could have addressed on the phone. So I go through just basic questions. I'm finding out what their finances are, what their living situation is. And then from there, we start to go through, does it make sense to do Medicaid? Are the needs appropriate? And then as we're going through that, I'm also trying to say, okay, well, where's your mom? Where is she right now? Oh, she's still in the hospital. Okay, what facilities are they suggesting? And I am not a care manager and I'm not a social worker, but I've heard the stories enough and I work with a lot of those people. So when I start to hear a family describing their stresses, look, I'm just a lawyer. I can only do so much. So I'll try to direct them to some great people who have helped out other families that I've worked with. And I put them in touch with them so that they can get through some other hurdles that may be a little bit less about the law and more about the process, because we got to get in a good place.
Yeah, and on the law side, so you mentioned you're trying to ascertain whether they're going to apply for Medicaid, whether they're going to apply for VA. So if you've met with the family and you've kind of ascertained, okay, we are going to go down that route, what is the information you really need? What are you looking at? You mentioned financials, you mentioned assets, you mentioned income. Kind of what are the important items there that the family needs, the information they need to get you, and the important issues you're looking for to be able to qualify these people for benefits?
Those are great. So basically income, so Social Security, investments, family income coming in. We start there. We'll talk about savings, retirement planning that they have done. Then we talk about the assets they have, real estate, equities, mutual funds, conservative assets, and more aggressive ones they may have, annuities, all this type of stuff. Basically, I say to them, let me see your checking account and I'll help figure out some things. And I'm always looking for, this is a hard one, excuse me, the Social Security statement. So if you have that, it comes in a little perforated envelope. Don't throw that out. Have that, just keep that, because that one's hard for people to get sometimes. And then another real difficult thing for people to get is life insurance information. And if they have somebody like you, they're miles ahead because you've probably gone through that with them as well. The life insurance companies move really slowly and it can cause some issues for us. But I try to address that in the first conversation to get them started. I'll say, hey, I can take care of all these 20 things. Just get me that life insurance, get it going. Yeah. So a really key thing, Steve, is, and it kind of goes back to probably the podcast you did last week or a couple of weeks ago with the woman about the pre-planning, is a power of attorney. So I say to each and every one of you, get a power of attorney drawn up. That is where you designate some important person in your life who you trust to help if you're not able to do certain things. Like, for example, you broke your legs, you can't go to the bank, but you literally need somebody to go to the bank for you. Who would that person be? Who would you trust? That person needs to be, that designation needs to be in writing.
Yeah.
But a good solid power of attorney changes everything if there's ever a situation for you where you can't communicate well, you can't do certain things, you can't call the insurance company to get the life insurance policy so we can take a look at it. Those kind of things are remedied by having a power of attorney. And I've been brought into lots of facilities to give presentations to all these people about complicated estate plans where we're creating these beautiful trusts. And I say, stop, we don't need to talk about that yet. What we need to talk about is something that matters while you're alive, not your will. Your will's after you've already passed away. Let's take care of things that are going to help you while you're alive. And for me, that number one item is a power of attorney. And I tell everybody that. And the people will say to me, the adult children, right? So we're helping out grandma. Grandma has a power of attorney. She's fantastic. She did what she was supposed to do. But the kids who might be 45, right? The grandkids or adult children, 45, 55, might say to me, oh, I don't need it. I'm not sick. And I say to them, do you not drive on 95? Are you never on the turnpike? Everybody is one bad turn from maybe ending up in the hospital. So I say, have that document. It's easy. It doesn't mean the person can come take your money out of your bank. It means if you need them to, they then have the authority to do what benefits you. They can't do things that don't benefit you. So you're not giving them the keys to the castle. You're kind of making it so you can give them the direction of where to get the keys.
Yeah.
So.
And so I'll say there also on, a couple of things on powers of attorney, even with our clients, we remind them when their children turn to age 18, right? They can't make decisions for them anymore. So everyone needs these power of attorneys. But let me go back to that financial information, like you say, that you need. And this is something that we do in our practice all the time. It's so important on my side when I sit down with clients, I say, listen, you have to provide us with everything, all the information, right? Because for us to give you good advice. When it comes to Medicaid planning, it is vital that they give you every single bit of information, because if they fail to disclose, right, it's going to come up. Medicaid, they're going to find out about it on the application, and it's going to set you back. So it's so vital at that point when the family's coming to you that they provide information on every single asset. Now, in good faith, they may not know all the assets, right? So I tell people in that case, a good place to go to is find a tax return, right? Look at their tax return. Is there information being reported here? Interest, dividends, right? That helps you to get all these things through. So that's a really, really big, really big issue there, that they have given you all that information to be able not only give the advice, but then when you're getting ready to make your application. So Andy,
right. What I do, Steve, after I've had this very scientific and legally based conversation that started with, so tell me what's going on, with that story. And they do tell me a lot, and we go through and I listen and I give them time and we really talk through the nuances. I then say, I'm going to send you a questionnaire where you can fill all this stuff in. You don't have to type it. You can just handwrite it. And it backs up that conversation, and it goes exactly to your point. It gives them the opportunity to think about those assets. And then at the same time, I'm asking them, hey, for your bank statements, how much was earned last year? So sometimes the tax returns are really important especially if somebody has sophisticated assets. But usually it's just that conversation plus this document that they can spend a little bit more time on. And they handwrite the information. It's not bad. It's 6 pages at most, and half those pages don't apply to most people. So they kind of can go through it pretty quickly, but it helps people narrow it down. And you're exactly right. If they've told me everything, I can fix almost everything on every single case, but I have to know about it. I have a case where my client seems like things just keep happening that we didn't expect. So maybe they didn't hide anything from me, but instead of having the whole universe of what's going on at the beginning, where I could put some pieces of the puzzle together really fast, I'm having to rebuild the puzzle over and over to help them. And honestly, a lot of these are very unique situations, so I can't blame the client or her family, but it's a lot harder. But if we know, the more we know at the beginning, the more we can fix. And so far, so good. Like, we don't have cases get denied. It's about having the right information from the beginning to set up the strategy, put the pieces of the puzzle together, and then we can submit timely. So
Andy, always when I would practice and these families would come in, right, one of the initial decisions I would make in kind of a judgment, it's kind of on my side, and talk to the family and talk them through it, is a certain level that if they had a certain amount of assets and a sufficient, amount of assets that were very large, they were going to be tough to plan around. I'd say, hey, listen, you guys, you don't really, it's not going to be in your best interest to go down this path for Medicaid, right? Because there's going to be a lot of decisions you're going to have to make irrevocably, irretrievably, it might not be the way to go. Do you have a general rule of thumb when you sit down? Remember, this is not somebody, it's a different conversation, right? We're like 5 years out looking to plan. This is, as your typical clients, you explained, they're coming in, they need the care. Is there a typical amount of assets that you kind of see, a ballpark to say, listen, if you have this, you probably need to self-pay for a little while longer, or you should think about it before we go into any really challenging Medicaid or VA planning?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, Steve, because if the person and their spouse is 75 versus 95, the person at 75 might have $800,000 sitting in their back pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
If their spouse at 75 is starting with a low level of dementia, we're seeing a 10 or 15 year perhaps horizon, that 800,000 is not enough. If the person is 95 years old and they have 800,000, I'm going to say, you're not going to live to 120, so you're fine, right? So it really is one of these things where it is case by case, and definitely a married couple is different than an individual. And it really depends all the other assets that are involved. So Steve, I'm a little abnormal as an attorney. I don't charge people for these conversations, and they're long. I will spend an hour with a client, usually while I'm driving to another client, but I will spend an hour on the phone with a client and chat and figure it out and be taking notes. So I tell people, just call me and I'll let you know. And there's definitely, I'll do the math. There's not a hard and fast number. And I don't want to, because for some people, $100,000, if that's their total assets, it's actually going to be enough because their income's really low. Their income's really low and we can plan around it really simply. Their needs aren't high. That may be enough. For another person with totally different needs, it could be $500,000. So it's really, I just feel it out with the clients, and I tell them there's pros and cons to every decision we make in life. I try to go over it with them. And I have had clients who I would say, look, your grandfather is not going, unfortunately, he's 101 years old. He is not going to live for a year. He's really sick. He's just come out of the hospital. He spent a month in the hospital. He's now in a nursing home. He's not going to live a year, right? It's obvious. Yeah. And I will tell the family, you don't need me, right? I've had families who still said, Mr. Bellison, I want you to do it, because doing something made them feel better than doing nothing, right? And so it's really a case by case, and without giving them horrible news like, hey, your loved one is going to pass away, because I don't like to say that, but
so let me ask this, Andy. We go through that. I totally understand. It is absolutely, it's case by case. All the assets are different. How does it go into this mix? All the families are different. Everyone comes, and you got to assess, right? That's what our job is, right? We can't just apply one idea and template to everybody. Let me let you address, maybe one of the, or maybe there's multiple, but I know the biggest concern or myth either that people come through when they say, hey, I would never even dream of applying for Medicaid, right? Is that I'm going to lose my house. They're going to take my house. They're going to take everything. I guess specifically on the house, and then maybe anything else. How does that work, regarding somebody and their homestead when they're applying for Medicaid and maybe their other assets in general? Kind of how does that work?
Great. So that's a great question. So firstly, let me touch on something you said. A lot of people like, ooh, Medicaid, I'm not poor. I don't need Medicaid. This is not the same Medicaid as people who, when they're younger, can get. It's just not. It sounds the same. It's kind of tied into the same program, but it's a completely different program. You can't do asset protection for Medicaid when you're 35 years old, but you can do it for us, for retired people. So the homestead is a big issue, right? Obviously, it's special in Florida, your homestead. It's really got a lot of positive characteristics. You can absolutely have Medicaid and own your homestead. Of course, if you're living in your homestead and you're getting to have Medicaid to pay for care to come to your home, that's one thing. So obviously you can keep your house there. If you're living in assisted living, absolutely, you can keep your homestead. And even in a nursing home, with the proper paperwork, you can keep your homestead and live in a nursing home. Because the hope is, in all those cases, you're going to do better and you're going to go back to your home, number one. Number two, and this is really important, when you're getting Medicaid, we want to characterize all of the assets in a way that is beneficial for you to get Medicaid, but also what happens next. So we will often recharacterize the homestead property and how it's owned, and it's called an enhanced life estate deed. I'm sure you've seen those, Steve. And it's where the person who owns the home continues to own it for the rest of their lives. And then upon their passing, just like in their will, but upon their passing, it goes to whoever they want, right? So it can go to their kids automatically. What makes it special, different than how you would have it passed in a will or in a trust, is it happens instantaneous, and Medicaid is aware that that deed exists. In fact, I show Medicaid that deed. I say, my clients got an enhanced life estate deed. So when they finish with getting their Medicaid for all these years, their house is going to transfer immediately to their children without going through probate. And Medicaid is going to be comfortable with it. Medicaid's never going to try to grab the asset. Medicaid never takes your house when you're living, right? But even after your passing, if the deeds are done right, if the IRAs are done right, and the assets are done right, Medicaid never comes back trying to claw back, because people have heard about clawbacks with government programs, right? But with this one, if everything's done right, there's no opportunity for them to claw back anything. Florida is very docile towards clawing back anyways with Medicaid for retired people. They're very good about it. But even if there was a fact pattern that allowed it, with a little bit of planning, you go around it. And the amazing thing about Medicaid is that everything we do, all my genius plans that I have in this head, I show to Medicaid. This is not some triple blind trust where we're out in the Cook Islands and down in the Bahamas, and none of that like CIA kind of stuff with moving money around. I show them everything we do. I show them what it looked like a few months ago. I show them where I moved it, the day I moved it. I show them even where I moved it to. And I give them all that stuff. Because you know what's the funniest thing, Steve? I have a lot of clients who live in Florida. The elderly person lives in Florida. Their kids are lawyers up on Wall Street, right? And they call me and they're like, hey, I need you to help my mom. And I do. And then I explain the techniques we're going to use, and I really lay it out. And particularly if this is a lawyer or somebody or accountant or somebody wants to talk about it, I really go into the details if they want. And they'll say to me, are you sure you're not committing fraud? And I'm like, well, I'm really bad at it because I'm showing them everything I'm doing. So, yeah. And I have had to send articles, scholarly articles, about what I do to these guys who are lawyers. I'm like, you don't get to bill me for that. I'm like, here,
yeah, it's counterintuitive, right? It really is, and it's you just nailed it. It's so much that, you know, absolutely you're not hiding everything. You have to show them that these rules allow it. And you kind of alluded to before, it's that there's these systems and these rules are in place in that they don't want people to go into a nursing home completely destitute, right? They understand that there are additional needs above and beyond that. So these different types of trusts, these asset transfers, these homesteads, these various incomes that they, you know, are there to supplement and help out and improve the quality of life, because they realize that anything a little bit that can help out these people, it won't be as difficult and as large as potentially a cost on the institutions that they have to go into, right? But it's counterintuitive, but that's exactly how it works, and to people and to work on it. And Andy, you know, so the home, I love that. I love how you stated that exactly, just to dispel that myth, right? Because I was always the biggest one I used to get. What other things, and maybe nothing, but as you're going through this process for the families as they're hesitant, what other items or hesitancy or things come up that you hear about that is a concern with a lot of families that you're able to address and say, hey, listen, I understand you have that concern. Many people do, but this is how we solve that. Is there any particular things that come up time and time again?
Yeah, so there's two. One's a more boots on the grounds kind of thing. It's where a family, an adult child will say, well, a Medicaid nursing home, that must be horrible, right? It must be just the worst, the dregs of society, worst situation. And that's not the case. I mean, look, nobody wants to be in a nursing home, right? That means you're sick or you're having some issues. But if you have to be in one, you want to be in one that's decent. You want to be in one that's nice. And with my clients, they're all in pretty good ones, right? Now, there's some that are better than others, of course, but if I come across a really bad one, I will tell the family. I don't care that the contact to the family came through the nursing home. I don't care. If the nursing home is not performing well, and a lot of them have management issues. One, it may have been good 2 years ago and not good anymore. I tell them, I'm like, these guys are not servicing you. They're understaffed or whatever. I'll tell the family. We have to look for alternatives. But generally speaking, they're fine. The Medicaid, the facilities themselves like their residents to have Medicaid as the payer source. So I get calls from the skilled nursing facilities while they're sitting and speaking to a family about applying for Medicaid when they're having trouble getting approved, or it's a complicated case. They'll say, hey, we know a lawyer. Here he is, Andy Bellinson. Give him a call. And I'll talk to them while they're in the office, actually, if they want, just, describe some solutions.
And let me add to that, Andy. That's great, because exactly, that's how I used to get them also. And so people understand is that there are not Medicaid nursing homes, right? That one nursing home that this is where all the people of Medicaid go to. No, that's not how it works. It's that there's these different facilities, and they have an allotted amount of Medicaid beds. So when you walk in there and you walk down the hall, you're not going to be able to tell who's on Medicaid and who's not. And I think that's a great point of that, right? That dispels a lot of them. No, this could be a very good, like you said, there's a lot of good ones, and that's kind of how it works. It's not like, they're going into this place where no one wants to go. So that's a great point. And so you mentioned there's another thing that comes up a lot.
So yeah, there's a great one. This I love, actually. So it's where there's a husband and wife, right? So maybe they actually do have a lot of assets. They've had a great life and they've saved money, but the husband's sick and the couple is 75 years old and the wife is healthy, and she's like, oh my God, if we spend all of our money trying to help my husband, I'm going to have none. So we'll get through this crisis and then we'll be destitute, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a mechanism where we can take all the joint assets, and even, let's say the husband's the one who needs the benefit, the husband's assets, and move them all to the wife. And then we do a single application, and we're like, again, we're showing them this. Oh, wife now has $700,000. Husband looks like he's got nothing, right? But we showed him everything. And then this one's great. So some wives, or spouses love this, but particularly the wives, they'll go, what's that called? And I tell them about the spousal transfers. And then I said, it's called spousal refusal. So you, as the spouse, right after you got all that money moved over to you, you say, I refuse to pay for my husband's care. Now, I've had some people just not want to do it just because that's what it was called. And I respect that. But when I tell them, oh, the nursing home's going to be $15,000 a month, they're like, that doesn't sound so bad, that spousal refusal. And it works very well. It traditionally was just for people in nursing homes, but down here in South Florida, they were a little bit more liberal on it. They allowed people who were going into assisted living, and sometimes even when they were living in the same house where the spouse was literally cooking him dinner, and we could still use spousal refusal. And now it's been codified that is the case statewide, which is huge, because I have a lot of families who need a little bit of help. And trust me, having $500,000, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. So we have to work to preserve it. And everything we do, we're showing to Medicaid. We're not hiding it. So if anybody thinks, ooh, that sounds a little fishy, well, I guess you wouldn't get approved if it was fishy, but it's not.
It's not, Andy. How can that be, Andy? How can that be, right?
It's so crazy. And I tell people all the time, just because you've used me, you paid me a lot of money, we got the approval, we did all this asset protection, it's now a year later, and you're still going through issues like Medicaid's paying for everything, it's all good, but you still have questions. And I'm one of the rare attorneys who actually they liked, whatever. So I get calls from my clients a year, 2, 3, 4 years later, still with little questions. They're like, it just doesn't seem right how you do this. We just want to make sure we're still doing it right. Because it was a long time ago we started doing it this way or that way. And I still chat with them. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is the way you do it. And because you know this, Steve, things sometimes just don't sound right after some time. You kind of, you did it, you followed the attorney's instructions, it all went perfectly, but you're a little unclear on how it all worked. They call me. And I'm like, no, you still do it this way. You put the money there and then you move it over there.
Yeah.
And again, every year there's a little review by Medicaid. Each year there's an annual renewal. So we show them all those things too. Year after year. Steve, I've never had somebody on their annual renewal not be renewed.
Yeah. No, you're great, Andy. You know what you're doing. So I'll tell you a little funny story, right? When I was early on and learning this Medicaid planning, like you say, you just said spousal refusal got codified, right? Which means for non-lawyers out there, it means it was put into statute. This is recognized as a way to do it. It's in the law, it's the laws that you read. Well, back in the earlier days, right, items like these, while they were allowed, they weren't codified, right? So you really didn't know about them, or where did you find out about them? So I remember one time we were working on a particular challenging case, and like you're like me, right? We understand that you're going to call the people at Medicaid, you're going to develop a rapport, you're going to develop a relationship, right? And I'm talking to this lady one day, we're just talking about a case, and she mentions, well, you should just go ahead and like do spousal refusal. I'm like, what? What's that? And she's like, anyway, we're going to hang up here. So she hung up the phone and faxed me. It was a one-page form. It was a one-page form that until the day I stopped practicing, we would copy that one form and sign it on the spousal refusal, right? Because you're like, how could this be? And so all of a sudden we sign the spousal refusal, we send it in, and boom, the approval letter came, right? So it's such a challenging, and really what this goes to, and what I'll say as we wind up here, is that you know what you're doing in this area of Medicaid planning and VA planning. There are so many people out there that don't, right? And it's hard to discern who does not know. There's some great websites, I'll put them in the show notes, about places where you can go, where attorneys that go there. But it's going to be tough to discern, right? Because you're like, somebody's going to tell you this, and you know what you're doing. You're telling them, you're giving them exactly great advice, and they're like, no, how can that be? It's a counterintuitive area, but a lot of it works, and it's really where we find themselves, right? If you have somewhat, even you haven't done that pre-planning. So, Andy, I really appreciate your time here. We've gone through this. We've discussed how you find the clients, kind of the planning process, the approval process. You mentioned how they get. Is there any other, word of advice to maybe a family who's maybe they're not right there just yet, they might be getting there soon, or maybe they are going through it, or anything like that you would put out there that would be, some words that you think could help them through this process?
Two different sides to that answer. One, honestly, if you have questions or you think you're going to have questions, you can call me. So Steve, please put that out there. And I really don't mind. And I swear, most of the time when I'm on those long phone calls, I'm driving because I go to my clients, because a lot of times my clients are in wheelchairs or they just broke their leg. I go to them. I drive to them. I set it up. It's just easier in South Florida because I know how to get there. They don't know how to come to my office. So I do all those long phone calls while I'm driving. So you're not taking up my time. It works well. It works really well. You keep me occupied while we're stuck in traffic on the turnpike. Number one. Number two, the piece of advice that I have to give everybody, and I already give it, get a power of attorney. Go get a power of attorney. It's really important. The power of attorney just does so much. You have a trusted family member. And the great thing about it, you can change it. You can change it. It's easy. You just write a new one and the old one's automatically gone. So that's really my piece of advice. The planning, the pre-planning, it's hard for people to wrap their heads around something that may or may not happen in the future. So you either have a great long-term care policy from before, or you've set up some wise annuities through right? Those are really helpful. But assuming you're like 75% of the people out there, you haven't done any of this until it happens. And
yeah, that's great advice, Andy. I love that. If anybody's listening here, if you have your parent, even for you, and even if they're potentially going down the road of dementia, go get that power of attorney right away, right? Because the longer you wait, the harder it comes. And with that, you can almost do anything. Without that, then the issues of, guardianship come in, and then you're not going to get the Medicaid planning done in the guardianship. So you really want to get that done right away. So Andy, I really appreciate your time, man. We're going to put their information out there. I hope anybody out there who's listened to this, they find this helpful. You'll have our information, you have Andy's information, and the families that are going through this. If anything here we share could head you down the road to make the process a little easier, then we're happy, and we've done our job.
Can I say one more thing before people go? Just a
Yes.
commercial for you, Steve. The times where I have, you've sent me clients, or it turns out that your clients are using me, we may not even have known that we're connected. People have so many nice things to say about you.
I
it's
appreciate
really,
it, man.
actually, that makes me feel good when I hear that. So, and I have heard it a lot. So that's
Same
good.
to you, buddy. Same to you. I just, I really appreciate that. All right, Andy.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. Have a great one.